The ethical dilemma that I chose to, that my group chose to deal with, was the ethical dilemma of capital punishment. Now, I know that capital punishment is a difficult topic, and Christians and others, they debate. Some debate for it, some debate against it. I know a lot of Christians probably are against the death penalty, and they use the Bible pretty heavily to defend their position. So in this video, I'm going to argue for the death penalty. I chose that side to defend, and I'm going to give 3 arguments why I think that the death penalty should be allowed, and as well as state my view on the death penalty, and give a final thought or two at the end. So my thought, or my viewpoint on the death penalty, is that I believe I'm for the death penalty. I do support the death penalty, and in this video, I'm going to point to 3 arguments that support my view of the death penalty. So the first argument that comes in support of the death penalty is the argument that the death penalty saves lives. Death penalty saves innocent lives, excuse me. And this comes from something that happened in the early 1960s and 1990s. So in 1960s, a man named Kenneth McDuff, he murdered 2 people, was sentenced to jail, and was supposed to receive the death penalty. However, there was a ban in from 1972 to 1976 that there were people that put a temporary ban from 1972 to 1976 on the death penalty, which resulted in McDuff not getting the death penalty like he should have. And as a result of that, McDuff, excuse me, McDuff was released on parole, and he eventually was able to murder again. In the 1990s, he raped and killed 8 women, and then he was once again tried, convicted, and this time he was sentenced to death in 1998 for murdering those women. So the problem here is that if McDuff had received the death penalty the first time, these women wouldn't have died. The 8 women that he raped and murdered in the 1990s, they would still be alive today. But because of temporary ban on the death penalty, McDuff didn't receive the death penalty until he was convicted again. And the truth of the matter is that there are criminals in prison who have already been convicted previously for murdering somebody, and then they would go back and commit another crime and then get put back in prison. So if these people are convicted and are given a death penalty, then you would see a cut down on crime, and innocent lives would be saved, like we see in the McDuff case. And this issue of crime being deterred from the death penalty goes into my next point, my next argument, that the death penalty stops crimes from happening, stops criminals from committing crimes, and it serves as a deterrent, if you will. And the base of this argument, if we look back in 1935, where Kansas reinstated the death penalty because of a string of murders. She previously, up to that, Kansas had taken away the death penalty, and criminals would go from the surrounding states and they would go to Kansas to commit crimes because there was no death penalty. And these same criminals would later confess and say, hey, like, we committed these crimes because we knew if we got in trouble, there's no death penalty, so we wouldn't die. We wouldn't get sentenced to death penalty. And another example of the death penalty being a deterrent for criminals is there was a young lady who robbed a bank and robbed it with an unloaded gun. And Senator Dianne Feinstein prosecuted her. And when she asked her, why did you rob the store with a unloaded gun? And the lady said, because if the gun was loaded, I would have panicked and shot somebody, and I didn't want to get the death penalty. So, because of having the death penalty in place, this lady only was charged with robbery, and nobody was killed. Because chances are, in that situation, she most likely would have panicked, and she would have shot someone, and not only would she receive the death penalty and be dead herself, but she would have probably shot the store clerk or someone else in the store who would also be dead. And Senator Dianne Feinstein actually says herself, crimes, in this case, the death penalty was a deterrent for crimes and for people making dumb decisions and killing people. And finally, the third argument for the death penalty, and probably the strongest, most important, is obviously the Bible. What does the Bible say? And so there are three scriptures that I want to point to: Genesis 9:5-6, Romans 13:1-7, and 1 Peter 2:13-14. And all these scriptures teach that the responsibilities of that the capital punishment is of the responsibility of the civil government, and that they are to punish the guilty party. In fact, Wayne Grudem even in his book on politics, he even says, or he cites Ezekiel 13:19 and argues that this whole argument of the whole life is sacred has its flaws, because Ezekiel 13:19 argues that the biblical ethic is not to protect all human life, but rather to protect the innocent and also punish the guilty in proportion to the crime they have committed. And so I believe that if someone commits a murder, that the death penalty should be something that should be looked at and can be acceptable, because this whole idea is to protect the innocent while punishing the guilty party. And granted, I think that we shouldn't just, if someone commits a crime, we shouldn't just jump and say, death penalty, death penalty, death penalty. I think the death penalty should be reserved for murderers, for people who commit a very serious crime, such as murdering people. I will agree that that there should be some reform regarding the death penalty. Whereas, like I said, the death penalty is only used in extreme case of murder, and it's not used for racial bias or really for anything, but simply because but simply as a means to protect innocent lives and punish the guilty. Now, in conclusion, I want to say that I understand every person has their convictions regarding the death penalty. Just because I support it, I'm not going to, put my conviction, or I'm not going to put my belief of the death penalty upon someone who believes that you shouldn't take an innocent life. If that's your conviction, that's your conviction. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to put my what I believe on you. And I think, because everyone has their own convictions, I think that we shouldn't try to force our convictions onto another person, because for whatever reason, everyone has their own convictions, and that's between them and God. And so, the close, as I said, I do support the death penalty. I believe that the death penalty, it deters people from doing crimes. It does protect innocent lives, and I think the Bible, I think the Bible speaks of death penalty, and I think the death penalty is something that should be reserved in the most serious. Some should be reserved for the most serious crimes, and should be done by the civil government as their or as a responsibility for justice.